Have you ever felt that the more you heal, the more you attract those who are still broken? That your light seems to guide others, but doesn't save you? Rumi said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." But what if it's your shadow that others see first? Perhaps you don't realize it, but there's a silent force in your pain, a kind of invisible beacon that doesn't attract those who want to love, but those who want to hide. Light attracts, yes, but shadow hypnotizes, and it is in this abyss that many bonds begin, not through the soul but through neediness. You try to be a light, you try to be healing, you offer presence, listening, surrender, but in the end, it seems they only seek you out when they need something, and when you need something, silence answers. It's as if your existence is only valid as long as it illuminates others, but nobody asks if you're fading away inside. What nobody tells you is that there's a brutal difference between being loved and being used as a resource. Some people approach you because of your soul, others because they're trying to escape their own. It's cruel, but true, and you feel it in the emptiness that appears when people leave without reason, in the emotional exhaustion of always giving, always supporting, always being the safe haven. Are they seeing your light, or are they just taking refuge from their own shadow within you? You're not exaggerating. You're not crazy. There is, in fact, a hidden pattern there, an unconscious attraction, a dance between the light you offer and the shadow that others avoid facing. And perhaps, just perhaps, you've learned to call this love, when in reality, it's just emotional survival. Rumi wrote, "Don't settle for stories of how things happen to others. Awaken your own legend." But how can you awaken if you spend your time putting out fires that aren't even yours? How can you be true light if your energy is always being drained by those who never intended to stay? Perhaps this is the question your soul needs to answer today. And perhaps the answer lies where you least expect it. If this question has touched something deep within you, write it in the comments. I choose the light that heals me, not the shadow that extinguishes me. Because when you name your decision, something inside you begins to change. And that change, even if silent, is the beginning of your liberation. This video isn't just another piece of content. It's a mirror of your soul. Every word was carefully chosen for those who feel too much, carry too much, give too much of themselves, and are almost never truly seen. Therefore, if you felt this message spoke directly to you, leave a like. It's more than a gesture, it's a seal that you choose to recognize yourself by. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because this awakening journey is only just beginning, and you no longer have to go through it alone. Have you ever noticed this? That the more you dedicate yourself to your healing process, the more wounded people appear in your path? As if your light, instead of warding things off, draws even more pain to others. As if the simple fact that you are trying to get up causes others to lean on you so they don't fall. And suddenly you find yourself in the middle of stories that aren't yours, pains that aren't yours, promises that never belonged to you. This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern. It's a silent dance between the soul that illuminates and those that still live in the shadows. And perhaps no one has told you this, but there are people who approach you not because of your light, but because of the shelter your pain represents. Because your pain, unlike what you've been taught, has presence. It has density. It attracts. It speaks even before you say a word. And often what others feel for you isn't love. It's identification with your emptiness. It's dependence on your acceptance. It's the unconscious comfort of knowing that someone will endure their fluctuations because you've already learned to endure yours. That's not romantic. That's not healthy. That's a bond created by neediness, not by true connection. The truth is, you're becoming more aware, more awake, more whole, but others still see you through the old version of themselves, the one who served, who kept quiet, who accepted less to maintain any kind of affection. They don't see who you're becoming. They connect with who you were, and the more you shine, the more this collective shadow is bothered, gets closer, tries to pull, tries to suck. Because light, when not understood, becomes a threat, and your soul, even silent, knows this. That's why you're being more selective. That's why you've been distancing yourself from noisy places. And that's why lately you feel too alone. But is it really loneliness? Or is it protection? Not every approach is love. Not every presence is companionship. Some people arrive smiling but carry emptiness they are unwilling to look at, and they see in you a bridge, not to healing, but to the momentary relief of the pain they insist on avoiding. You become that relief. You become a lap, comfort, a shield. And at first this even seems like affection, but with time, it hurts. Because you realize you are alone, even surrounded, that you are exhausted even being strong, that you are extinguished even trying to ignite the other person. You feel like you're losing yourself in the process of saving others, that you're carrying emotional responsibilities that no one directly asked you for, but that you've always accepted. Because for you, love has always come with a little sacrifice. It's always been an unbalanced exchange between giving everything and expecting the bare minimum. But your soul is tired. It's silently screaming for you to see. It's not your role to be a home for those who will never build anything alongside you. It's not your mission to rescue everyone who mistakes you for salvation. And it's not love when you have to fade away so that the other person can shine. Perhaps you're going through this right now. Maybe someone approached you with sweet words, intense affection, promises of eternity, and little by little, drained you. They didn't hurt you with violence, but with absence. They didn't wound you with shouts, but with silence. And this kind of pain is the one that leaves the deepest mark, because it doesn't leave a visible scar, but it compromises your ability to trust. And you start to wonder, is the problem me? Am I asking for too much? Is being a light the same as being condemned to live alone? No, it's not. But it's not simple either, because when you become light, you become a mirror. And those who aren't ready to see themselves will blame you for what they see in themselves. They'll call you intense, difficult, exaggerated. They'll run away from you, and then come back. They'll say they miss you, but they'll never truly stay. Because they're not dealing with you, they're dealing with their own shadow. And your presence only reveals what they can't yet bear to face. There's a dark beauty in all of this. There's something sacred in the way you've faced each wound, how you've silenced yourself to listen to yourself, how you've respected your own cycles even without anyone teaching you to do so. You are transforming. But transformation, however poetic it may seem, hurts. And sometimes it pushes people away, because your frequency changes, your gaze changes, your touch changes, and those who were used to your wounded version don't know how to deal with your healed version. Perhaps you are now living in this limbo between what you no longer are and what you are still becoming. And in this space, everything seems strange. Connections break down, bonds weaken, the world seems distant, but this distance is necessary. It is in this distance that your soul breathes. It is in this distance that your light is strengthened. It is in this distance that you begin to attract, no longer out of neediness, but out of truth. And speaking of truth, tell me, which part of this video spoke to your soul? Write in the comments. Choose a phrase that resonated within you, one that hasn't left your mind, because by writing, you seal this awakening. And awakening, even in silence, never again falls completely asleep. Perhaps you've spent a good part of your life believing you were loved, welcomed, desired, when in reality, you were just a support for people who never truly wanted to see themselves. People who saw you as a beacon, a reference point, an escape. And in the beginning, it even seemed like love, it seemed like presence, it seemed like care. But over time, the absence began to hurt more than the presence healed, because you realize they only seek you out when they need something. That they appear on good days but disappear on the days you bleed in silence. And this programmed absence, this emotional disappearance, hurts you more than any clear rejection. You try to understand. You try to justify. You try not to feel overwhelmed by feeling too much, but deep down, the pain persists. An invisible pain. A pain that makes no sound, but weighs on the body, steals sleep, chills the chest. Because it's not just the absence of others that hurts. It's the forced presence you had to endure while pretending everything was all right. It's the weight of carrying shallow connections while your soul screamed for depth. It's the weariness of being a shelter for those who never thought of protecting you from their own storm. You are not being loved when you need to diminish yourself to fit into someone else's life. You are not being seen when you need to scream silently to be noticed. And you, with all your sensitivity, with all your soul that feels even before understanding, know this, but it hurts to accept. It hurts to admit that perhaps the love you always sought was never love, but only a need. and you were mistaken for the answer when in reality you were just a mirror, a reflection that others used to see themselves as stronger, more stable, more whole, even if it cost you your peace. This is one of the hardest wounds to heal, realizing you were in the background of your own story, that you became an emotional support for others while no one else was there for you, that you kept quiet to maintain harmony, that you adapted to avoid being abandoned, and even then, you were, not once but many times. And this shapes a dangerous internal narrative. I am not enough, I am too much, I am too complicated. But that's not true. What happens is that your soul has a different frequency, and people who live in noise don't know what to do with those who vibrate in silence. Perhaps that's why you feel disconnected, as if no one truly understands, as if the world is always one step behind your pain, and when you try to explain, it seems like you're exaggerating. But the truth is your pain is refined. It's ancestral. It's a soul pain. It doesn't just come from now. It comes from years of being emotionally neglected, from experiences that taught you to be strong too soon, from forced silences when all you needed was to be heard. And this silent pain creates patterns of attraction, of repetition, of abandonment. You start to realize you're always in the same emotional place, even when the people change. The scenery changes, the names change, but the feeling is always the same. Giving everything and receiving crumbs, being open but not being accessed, being available but not being a priority. And that exhausts you, not physically, spiritually, because it's not the body that gets tired first, and it's the soul. It's the soul that feels when it's being ignored. It's the soul that perceives when the other person's presence is too superficial to touch what truly needs healing. And even knowing all this, you still blame yourself, because your rational mind tries to justify it. But she said she loved me. But she was there for the first few months. But she reached out to me when they were feeling down. Yes, they reached out. But did they stay when you started showing who you really are? Or did they only stay until the moment your light began to demand emotional maturity? Because not everyone is prepared to remain in the light of someone who knows them. Most prefer the fantasy of an easy, shallow, predictable love. But you are deep. And that's why it bothers them. That's why it attracts and at the same time scares them. Rumi said, "You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens." And perhaps that's what's happening now. Your heart is opening, even if the pain tries to prevent it. You're beginning to see that you no longer want relationships where you have to explain yourself all the time. That you no longer want to live in cycles of presence and disappearance. That you no longer want to be the one who saves when all you need is to breathe. And this clarity is the beginning of liberation, but it comes accompanied by loneliness, because ceasing to be what others projected onto you often means being abandoned by them. Yes, it hurts. It hurts to realize that their love had an expiration date, that their bond had conditions, that their presence depended on how available you were to be emotionally helpful. And at the same time, there's a silent lightness in that, because pain also reveals. It shows who remains. It reveals who was there for you and who was only there for themselves. And when that truth emerges, you can no longer pretend. You can no longer go back to that place of emotional blindness. You can no longer accept so little from someone you gave so much to. Therefore today, I invite you to look at all of this honestly, not to blame yourself, but to understand. Because understanding is the first step to healing. And healing in your case is not forgetting. It's embracing. It's naming the wound. It's saying in a low voice, "I deserve more. I deserve reciprocity. I deserve to be seen without having to lose myself." And when you do that, something changes. The type of connection you attract changes. The type of pain you accept changes. The way you position yourself in the world changes. If any part of this video affected you, write it in the comments. I deserve to be seen without fading away. Choose this phrase, because it's not just a venting of feelings. It's a decision, and every true emotional decision changes the destiny of your soul. You were born with wings, but perhaps no one taught you how to fly. Perhaps the world made you forget that you were made of sky. Rumi said, "You were born with wings. Why do you prefer to crawl through life?" And this question seems simple, but it carries one of the most painful and transformative truths you can hear. Because it's not that you don't know how to fly, it's that you were convinced that it was dangerous to take flight, that it was risky to expand, that it would be selfish to shine too brightly. So, you learn to diminish yourself. You learn to crawl emotionally through environments that were never made for your soul. And it was in this crawling, in this silencing of yourself, that you began to attract people through the shadows. Not because you are dark inside, but because your light is still hidden behind layers and layers of fear, guilt, and self-protection. You don't attract broken people because you're weak. You attract them because you have healing within yourself. But when that healing hasn't yet been directed towards yourself, it leaks out. It overflows onto others. It seeks places to be useful. And this being useful becomes your emotional identity. It becomes the reason why you remain in relationships that don't uplift you. Because there's an unconscious guilt within you about being light, a feeling that, if you're whole, you'll distance yourself from those you love. That, if you're free, you'll end up alone. And this guilt is silent. It doesn't scream, but it defines choices. It doesn't show itself, but it sabotages decisions. That's why, even as you evolve, you still feel like you're returning to the same point. It's as if there's an invisible force pulling you back to older versions of yourself. And that force has a name: emotional attachment to your old role. That role of the savior, the one who understands everything, the one who welcomes everyone, except themselves. And this emotional programming was learned, perhaps in childhood, where you needed to be the strong one, the one who didn't cause trouble, the one who emotionally cared for the adults. Perhaps in relationships, where your love was conditioned on your usefulness, where affection came with emotional demands that weren't yours. And this molds you. It turns you into someone who only feels secure if they are needed, someone who confuses value with sacrifice. And the worst part, someone who unconsciously attracts people who validate this cycle. Spirituality isn't a refuge where you hide from pain. It's the mirror where you finally see yourself completely, including the parts that hurt, including the parts that still crawl, even with open wings. And part of that flight begins when you understand that attracting people through your shadows isn't punishment. It's a sign that there's an inner wound begging to be looked at, that there's a part of you that still believes you'll only be loved if you're accessible, if you're easy, if you're too understanding. But true love doesn't demand that you diminish yourself. It demands that you reveal yourself. And revealing yourself sometimes means breaking all the silent emotional pacts that keep you bound to painful ties. Have you ever noticed how there's a pattern in the types of relationships you attract? People who arrive quickly, commit quickly, but also disappear quickly. People who call you home, but never build anything with you. People who say they love you, but only show up when they need something. This isn't bad luck. This is frequency. It's energetic vibration. It's the universe's response to something that's still being carried within you. And this burden is often ancestral. It's emotional. It's spiritual. It can't be resolved with logic alone. It needs to be felt, acknowledged, traversed. You have light, but you're still used to the shadows. And that's why your light attracts those who want to escape their own darkness. But don't confuse that with a mission. It's not your role to be a shelter for those who don't want to change. It's not your role to be a bridge for those who don't want to cross anything. You are here to fly, not to carry the world on your shoulders. And the guilt you feel for distancing yourself, for saying no, for choosing yourself, is just a reflection of the old version of you, who still believes that to love is to annihilate yourself. But that's not love. That's emotional survival disguised as surrender. And why does this happen so often to you? Because you feel so much. Because you see beyond the obvious. Because your soul is home to many lost souls. And this, for a time, seems beautiful. It seems purposeful. But what is beautiful if not conscious becomes a prison. You cannot be home to anyone if you still live homeless within yourself. And that is what true spirituality teaches you. That your healing begins where you stopped listening to yourself. That the turning point is not outside but inside. That the light that attracts is not the one you project, but the one you accept to inhabit. When you begin to accept your light, when you stop hiding to be accepted, something changes. Relationships change. Connections transform. Because you stop being held hostage by the other person's neediness. You stop trying to deserve love, and you finally begin to live love as it is. Free, light, whole. And yes, some people leave when this happens, because your presence ceases to be comfortable for those who fed on your pain. But this is not loss. It's alignment, and this alignment begins with a silent decision to no longer carry what is not yours, to no longer crawl to please, to fly, even if it distances you from those who still live on the ground, because you were not born to crawl. You were not born to adapt to small relationships. You were born to expand, to illuminate, to heal, starting with yourself. If you felt this resonated directly with you, write in the comments, "I accept my light completely," not just as a phrase, but as a choice, because the soul awakens when it finds words that translate its truth, and its truth is ready to be lived. What no one told you is that not everyone approaches you with pure intentions. Not everyone is captivated by your soul because they want to know it. Many approach you because they see in you a temporary refuge from the pain they avoid facing within themselves. They use your light as a hiding place, not as a guide. You become the silence where they rest from their own noise, the lap that welcomes what even they themselves cannot accept. But when your light begins to illuminate their shadows, those that were buried, denied, hidden, they retreat, distance themselves, disappear. And that's not your fault. That's just a reflection of what happens when someone seeks comfort but finds truth, when they expect escape but find a mirror. You are not here to carry anyone. This is a painful truth, but one that liberates. You are here to rise, and those who are not willing to grow with you will inevitably be left behind. The soul's journey is often lonely because not everyone can bear the weight of their own transformation. And when you begin to move with more awareness, to speak with more truth, to stand more firmly, you become an invitation to change, but also an uncomfortable reminder of everything the other person is not yet. And it is at this point that many abandon the path, not because of you, but because they are not ready for the light you hold with so much effort. There's a hidden spiritual key in this process, and it reveals itself when you stop blaming yourself for the absences, the ruptures, the silences that follow your choices for growth. The key lies in understanding that you are not responsible for the wound the other person refuses to heal. You are not to blame for no longer being able to be who you once were. And above all, you have no obligation to shrink yourself to keep someone close, because love that demands erasure is not love. It's emotional imprisonment. It's very easy to confuse presence with love, but whoever truly loves you doesn't hold you back. They inspire you. They don't demand immediate healing. They accompany you. They don't put you in the role of savior. They recognize you as a soul. And this kind of love doesn't demand that you bend over backward, that you hide, that you pretend to be less than you are. This love, rare and real, only arrives when you stop accepting the mere scrap of affection that the world tries to offer you. You've been conditioned to give of yourself in order to be accepted, to offer your energy even before asking if the other person deserves it. And that's not generosity, it's a pattern of emotional survival. It's the soul trying to guarantee belonging at any cost. But at what cost? How many times have you found yourself exhausted? How many times have you caught yourself saying, "No one does for me what I do for others"? How many times have you felt like you were carrying the weight of an entire relationship while the other person didn't even notice? This burnout has roots. It stems from the imbalance between giving and receiving, between supporting and being supported, between being a light and being seen. And you don't need that anymore. You no longer need to prove your worth by offering what no one directly asked for, but what everyone silently expected. You have the right, and more than that, the responsibility, to break this cycle, because otherwise, you continue to attract people who don't see you, who only use you for their own benefit. It's a shock when that realization hits you, because many of your most intense bonds may have been built precisely in that place. From your willingness to be a shelter for those who never wanted to live within themselves. From your readiness to offer love where there was only confusion. From your tireless attempt to maintain connections that only existed because you nurtured them yourself. And you begin to realize that when you stop nurturing them, they die. Not because they weren't important, but because they were one-sided. And at this point, a spiritual truth emerges that only the most conscious can uphold. It is better to be alone than in relationships that drain your essence. It is better to walk in silence than to be surrounded by noises that confuse your heart. Because the soul needs clarity, peace, and depth, and none of these things flourish where you are being used as an emotional crutch. Some approach to drain you, others to hide, few approach to share. Few have the spiritual maturity to look into your eyes and see not just a reflection of their own shortcomings, but a whole soul, with history, with pain, with brilliance. These are the ones who stay. These are the ones who remain. But to find them, you first need to leave where you are being extinguished. You need to leave the field where your light is used, not celebrated. You need to break with the idea that prioritizing yourself is selfish, because it isn't. It's awareness. It's spiritual self-care. It's self-love elevated to its purest form. Rumi reminds us that true love begins within ourselves, not as narcissism, but as a foundation, as a solid base. Because when you love, respect, and recognize yourself, you no longer accept half-hearted relationships. You don't sell yourself for superficial affection. You don't settle for those who only show up when they need something. You create a new pattern, a new field of attraction. And then, yes, you begin to receive the love that you previously only knew how to give. And this love, when it arrives, doesn't exhaust you. It regenerates you. It propels you forward. It doesn't demand sacrifice. It demands presence, true presence, clean presence, conscious presence. And it all begins when you understand this. You are not here to carry anyone. You are here to fly. And flying requires lightness. It requires you to leave behind what doesn't accompany you. It requires you to understand that it's not your role to save those who still refuse to leave their own emotional prison. If something inside you understood this truth, write it in the comments. I free myself from the task of carrying the other. This phrase is a portal, a code, a permission, because the soul only flies when it accepts that it didn't come into the world to crawl alongside those who don't want to leave the ground. Perhaps you've experienced this more than once. A friendship that began as a comforting embrace, but which over time revealed itself to be a disguised dependency. Someone who said they admired you, who praised your strength, your listening skills, your presence, but who only appeared when everything in their life was falling apart. And you, with that immense heart and naturally empathetic soul, welcomed them. You gave. You were there. Until you realized that the bond wasn't mutual, it was functional. That your light was sought, not to be shared but to be used as a momentary shelter. And that, when you needed presence, depth, someone to stay by your side even when you weren't strong, silence answered. Or perhaps it was love. That intense, overwhelming connection that seemed inexplicable from the start. You felt there was something special there, a connection of souls, an invisible dance between two inner worlds that finally seemed to recognize each other. But over time, something began to hurt. And it wasn't just longing, it was exhaustion. It was the silent pain of realizing you were constantly changing, that every gesture of affection you offered seemed to increase the distance, that your giving was received but never returned. That, in truth, what the other person loved wasn't you. It was the feeling of being healed by you. You thought they were connecting through their souls, but it was through unhealed pain. His, hers, and yours too, perhaps. Because when two wounds meet unconsciously, love isn't born. Attachment is born. Emotional confusion is born. And then a cycle begins. One feeds off the other's strength. One leans on the other. One drags on. One pulls. And the other carries. Until the one carrying can't take it anymore. And when that happens, guilt comes. Shame. The feeling of having failed to save. But you didn't fail. You simply healed enough to no longer accept being a healer for someone who doesn't want to heal. These relationships, however painful they may be, are instructive, because they show how much we are still trying to deserve love through sacrifice. They show how we still confuse intensity with true connection. They show how we still tend to confuse passion with salvation. And this is one of the most common illusions for souls like yours. Deep, sensitive, and so accustomed to carrying more than they should. Because when you are light, you attract those who are in darkness. And if you still haven't understood that your light is not an obligation, you accept roles that slowly extinguish you. You weren't loved. You were needed. You weren't seen. You were used as a beacon. And that hurts. It hurts because deep down, you wanted it to be real. That love to be whole. That friendship to be mutual. That bond to be spiritual, not just emotional. But the truth is, not everyone is ready for its depth, and many connect only to momentarily alleviate pain they aren't willing to go through. And in this dynamic, whoever feels more always suffers more. Because while the other finds comfort, you give away your soul, and then you ask yourself, How did I not realize it before? How did I let this happen again? But this isn't a lack of awareness. It's an excess of heart. It's that silent hope that if you love enough, the other person will transform. They will see you. They will stay. But transformation only happens from the inside out. And those who aren't willing to look inward will always run away. They will always blame. They will always distance themselves when your light demands true presence. And when they leave, they don't always say goodbye. Sometimes they drift away. They become silent. They leave you talking to yourself. They disappear without leaving. And that breaks you into invisible pieces, because you realize you're alone even when you're with someone, that you're screaming silently within a relationship that no longer listens to you, that you're giving love to someone who only wants anesthesia, not awakening. You are not alone. This pain is more common than it seems. Many people experience it but can't name it. You are giving voice to a spiritual truth that many feel but cannot explain. And when you begin to see this, something inside you changes. Neediness becomes a criterion. Surrender becomes awareness. Love becomes a choice, not an escape. And that's when your life changes. Not from the outside in, but from the inside out. Because you stop accepting less than you deserve. And you begin to understand that your light is not a bargaining chip. It is sacred. This light, when respected, creates a new field of attraction. You begin to see that you no longer want to be needed. You want to be loved. You no longer want to be useful. You want to be seen. You no longer want to be a solution. You want to be present. And those who don't know how to handle this will leave. But those who stay whole. They stay clean. They stay willing. They stay because they want to grow alongside you, not hide behind you. They stay because they recognize your soul, not just your emotional usefulness. If any memories just surfaced, if any connections crossed your mind while you were listening to this, write them in the comments. I deserve relationships that see me as a whole person, because when you write, you declare. When you declare, you break free. And when you break free, you create space for the new. And the new, in your case, is already at the door. It just needs space to enter. You've spent too much time trying to save those who still feed on their own darkness. You've tried to rescue people who didn't even ask for help, and others who did ask but never truly wanted to leave where they were. And that's not weakness on your part. It's purity. It's surrender. It's that compassionate soul you carry. But there comes a time when compassion needs to transform into discernment, because limitless love becomes a prison. Surrender without awareness becomes exhaustion, and light without direction becomes a fire that consumes you. You are not here to save those who still choose darkness. Your mission is not to rescue anyone. Your mission is to be light, and that will often be unsettling. It will push people away. It will expose them, because not everyone is ready to face their own shadow reflected in your clarity. Not everyone wants transformation. Some want comfort. They want the relief your energy brings. They want the feeling of peace you transmit. But they are not willing to do the inner work necessary to sustain that peace within themselves. So they feed off yours. And when you stop offering it, they disappear. When you set boundaries, they get annoyed. When you say, enough, they call it coldness. But that's not coldness. That's awareness. There's a point in your journey where something inside you awakens. It's a silent, almost imperceptible point, but it changes everything. You stop wanting to be understood and start understanding yourself. You stop trying to be chosen and choose yourself. You stop seeking approval and begin to honor your own soul. And this, even if it doesn't solve all the pain at once, puts you in a different energetic place. A place where you stop begging for love, where you no longer bow down for affection, where you understand that you don't need to be accessible to everyone because your light is not public. It's sacred. This shift in consciousness doesn't come as a shout. It arrives as a whisper, an internal enough, a no more now. I'm tired of losing myself to maintain connections that weren't even real. And it is there, at that point of intimate rupture, that the transformation begins. You stop being the backdrop to other people's stories and become the author of your own. You cease to be a secondary character in the plots that hurt you and begin to write your own narrative with your soul. This is what Rumi talks about when he says, "Don't settle for stories of how things happen to others. Awaken your own legend. Because as long as you are living to please, to maintain, to hold on to those who have already shown they don't want to stay, you are erasing your own story. And your story deserves to be written with truth. With pain, yes, but with awareness. With scars, yes, but with freedom. With losses, with separations, with silences, but also with light, with presence, with authenticity. Because awakening isn't about not suffering. It's about no longer accepting suffering for things you can choose to let go of. It's about no longer trading your own peace to sustain fragile bonds. It's about stopping saving those who insist on sabotaging themselves and starting to save yourself every day. And from that point on, things start to move differently. You no longer chase after those who avoid you. You don't beg for space in hearts that only open to you when they are empty. You don't ask to be seen by those who choose to close their eyes. You simply follow. And those who have light, follow. Those who have soul, understand. Those who have maturity, remain. Because now your energy is no longer available to just anyone. It is directed, intentional, clear. And this creates an invisible filter around you. People who once fed on your light can no longer access you in the same way. Because you have changed your frequency. And changing the frequency is an act of spiritual courage. It's accepting that you will lose people, but you will find yourself. It's accepting that not everyone will understand, but your soul will breathe a sigh of relief. It's understanding that some connections only existed because you were asleep to yourself. And now, awake, you begin to see everything more clearly. The emotional manipulations, the power games, the bonds based on neediness, and everything that seemed like love shows its true face. But this clarity isn't bitter, it's liberating. Because you stop carrying the weight of being everything to everyone. You stop emotionally mutilating yourself to fit into small spaces. You no longer need to justify having changed, grown, awakened. You simply are. And being, in your case, is revolution enough. And you know what happens when you accept this? You start attracting what is compatible. The pain doesn't disappear, but it stops controlling you. The fear still exists, but it stops deciding. Loneliness appears sometimes, but it no longer scares you like before, because now you know that being alone doesn't mean being empty. It means being whole. It means being present with your own truth. And if this turning point is happening within you right now, if some part of you is saying, yes, this is it, if your soul is trembling but at peace with this new awareness, write in the comments, I awaken my legend from within. Because when you write, you anchor. When you declare, you activate. And when you activate, you position yourself in the world in a way that no one else can erase. There comes a moment in the soul's journey when you look at everything you've built in the name of love and realize how many times you've sacrificed yourself to keep someone close. How many times you've pretended to be strong for fear of being abandoned. How many times you've been an anchor for someone who never wanted to sail with you. How many times you've sunk just to keep someone afloat. And it is in this silent, almost imperceptible moment that conscious detachment is born. A state of presence and spiritual maturity where you finally understand that you are not here to carry anyone, nor to prove your worth in exchange for attention. You no longer need to be an anchor. You can, and should, be a wing. To be a wing is to fly even if no one comes along. It's choosing lightness over function. It's ceasing to take responsibility for those who insist on walking in circles. And this kind of choice, contrary to what it seems, is not coldness. It's love. Love for yourself. Love for your own light. Love for the life you almost stopped living trying to save someone who didn't even want to be saved. Because there's a brutal difference between being together and being dragged along. True love doesn't hold you back, doesn't drain you, doesn't diminish you. True love begins when you choose yourself, even if it pushes away those who have never seen your soul. You're not losing anything when you distance yourself from those who don't recognize the value of your presence. You're gaining space to breathe, to listen to yourself, to rebuild yourself without the interference of pains that aren't yours. Conscious detachment is the cure for a soul that's tired of begging for attention. It's the liberation of a heart that has loved too much at its own expense. And it's at this point in the journey that you realize your mission is no longer to maintain ties. It's to remain whole. Many will call you cold when you stop accepting crumbs. Others will say you've changed, that you're distant, that you've become selfish. But none of them saw how many nights you cried silently for not being a priority. None of them carried your emotional exhaustion. None of them listened to your silent pleas for reciprocity. So don't accept judgments from those who were never truly present. You don't owe anyone an explanation for deciding to love yourself with more courage. When you choose yourself, many things crumble. Fragile bonds break. Masks fall. Links that only existed because you sustained them disappear. And this, at first, may even seem like loss. It may seem like loneliness. But with time, you realize that what went away was exactly what was preventing you from growing. The right people aren't bothered by your light. They are inspired by it. They don't distance themselves from your authenticity. They get even closer. They don't make you choose between you and them. They help you to be even more yourself. To consciously detach is to say, I allow myself to experience what nourishes me. It is to break unconscious pacts of pain. It is to undo energetic alliances that only pull you back. It is to stop trying to convince the other person that you deserve love. You deserve it. Period. Not because of what you offer, what you do, or how much you can endure, but because your essence is valuable. Your presence is healing. Your existence is sacred. And if someone cannot see this, it is a sign that they are not ready to walk beside you. And that's okay. You don't need a crowd to feel whole. You need truth, presence, shared silence, a gaze that recognizes you. And that kind of connection only comes when you let go of everything you accepted out of neediness. The emptiness that remains after detachment is real, but it's not the end. It's the space where the new begins to be born. It's the clearing of the soul where the light enters, where healing settles in, where your essence can finally breathe without fear of being abandoned for being too intense. When you allow yourself to be heaven instead of prison, something within you aligns. Relationships become lighter. Encounters cease to be arrangements for emotional survival and become celebrations of presence. And, most importantly, you no longer need to constantly prove that you deserve to be there. You simply are. And whoever is on the same wavelength stays. Because true love doesn't ask you to fade away to fit in. It invites you to shine even brighter. And shining isn't about being perfect. It's about being honest. It's about saying no when your soul screams. It's about walking away even when you miss someone. It's about realizing that the soul's path is often lonely, but never empty. Because the more you find yourself, the more the universe begins to surround you with people who have also found themselves. And then, the bonds change tone. They change color, depth, intention. You no longer need to linger where your presence isn't celebrated. You no longer have to beg for attention where your absence isn't even noticed. You can, and should, leave places where love has become routine, where giving has become demanding, where your soul no longer feels at home. You are the sky. You are wings. You are the path. And you weren't made to drag yourself along in the name of bonds that don't uplift you. If something within you felt this liberation arriving, if some part of you silently resonated with these words, write in the comments, I am a wing, and I choose to fly. Because by writing this, you reaffirm your flight, even if there is still fear, even if there is still pain. Because the sky has always been waiting. You just needed to allow yourself to take flight. Some seek you out for your light, not because they wish to be illuminated by you, but because they have learned to survive in the gaps of someone else's brilliance. It's not admiration. It's shelter. It's not connection. It's disguised need. They don't come to walk beside you, but to rest on the path you have already built with your pain, your healing, your surrender. They are people who look at you and see what they don't have the courage to awaken within themselves. And then they approach, subtly, sweetly, silently, until, when you realize it, you are extinguishing your own light to keep the world of someone who doesn't even want to find their own light switch lit. But there are also those who come from the shadows, not yours, but the ones they can hide within you. People who found refuge in your acceptance, who saw in your empathy a cloak to avoid taking responsibility for anything. And you, with that soul made of silence and tenderness, with that heart molded in abandonment but trained to love, allowed it. Because part of you still believed that love was this, giving yourself, erasing yourself, remaining silent. Part of you still confused presence with love, need with connection, intensity with truth. But now, you are seeing beyond. You are feeling beyond. You are remembering the truth that lies behind all of this. The soul recognizes. The soul does not lie. And that's why, at this moment, you might be reevaluating many of your relationships. realizing that there was more loneliness within some of your company than in your moments of silence, noticing that your light was more drained than celebrated, understanding finally that you weren't loved, you were useful, and that this isn't love. This is an unconscious emotional survival strategy of someone who hasn't yet learned to be self-sufficient. But now, with this new awareness pulsating within you, with this clarity unfolding like a flower amidst the chaos, you begin to differentiate shared light from sucked-up light, deep love from silent attachment, soul connection from painful connection. You begin to truly listen to your intuition, that voice that has always been there, but that the noise of emotions prevented you from hearing. And it says, not everyone who seeks you deserves to find you. Not every admiring gaze has the courage to truly see you. Not every touch that feels like love comes from a clean place. And you no longer need to subject yourself to bonds that feed the neediness of others at the expense of your essence. Those who recognize your soul behind the shine stay, because they see what is most valuable in you: your wholeness, your journey, your falls, your renunciations, your courage to continue even after so many losses. These people don't stay because they need to. They stay because they choose to. And that changes everything. Because you cease to be a function. You cease to be a crutch. You cease to be merely a useful presence, and you become a true presence. You become a respected companion. You become a soul alongside another soul, without needing to transform yourself to deserve to stay. And when this kind of relationship happens, you feel it. It's light. It's peaceful. It's real. You don't need to force it, explain it, justify it. You simply are. And that's enough. There are no games. There's no manipulation. There are no demands. There's exchange. There's mutual acceptance. There's comfortable silence. There's space to be vulnerable without fear of being discarded. And that's what your soul has always sought, even when your body was still chasing after crumbs. The truth is, you never really wanted much. You just wanted reciprocity. You just wanted someone to feel your absence the way you feel the absence of someone who leaves without saying goodbye. You just wanted to be listened to with the same depth that you listen, to be looked at as someone who sees a universe, not as someone seeking temporary shelter. But for a long time you accepted less, because you didn't yet know your worth, because you didn't yet recognize your light as sacred, because you still believed you needed to mold yourself to be loved. But now you know. Now you remember. And this remembrance, this reconnection with your deepest truth, will be uncomfortable for some. It will cause certain people to distance themselves. It will leave others confused. But that's okay. The process of energetic purification is like that. When your vibration changes, the field around you also changes. And what is not aligned simply slips away. Not because you expelled it, but because it no longer fits. And that's what differentiates those who sought you for the light from those who were only looking for a place to hide. May you learn to protect your brilliance without fear of seeming harsh. May you understand that love isn't measured by how much you can endure, but by how much you are seen while you feel. May you embrace silence as an ally, not an enemy, because it is in silence that the soul reveals itself, and it is in conscious solitude that you understand who you truly are. If you feel you are going through this turning point, if your heart is beating even in the midst of pain, write in the comments, "I choose to be a light without fading away." Because this phrase is not just a thought, it's an act of courage. It's an inner declaration, and whoever declares it transforms, and whoever transforms inspires. If you've made it this far, it's because something within you recognized this truth, because your soul heard the call. And that's already a giant step on your journey of awakening. So now I invite you to continue walking with me. If this message spoke to you on some deep level, subscribe to the channel here. Each video is a mirror, a portal, a whisper that reminds you of who you truly are. Please leave a like if you felt this message touched a place you didn't even know existed. This helps this content reach other souls who, like you, are ready to awaken. And now, don't stop here. The next video is already appearing on your screen. It's a continuation of this journey. Click and follow, because your soul is only beginning to remember who it is.